Hello, everybody. My name's Henry Normal. Thanks for joining me. This is the third of the Zooms that I'm doing with Flapjack Press and the Manchester libraries. And what I'm doing is I'm talking to each of my fellow Flapjack poets for about an hour. But to start off with, let me introduce you to our poet this week. I say it's another Flapjack poet. It's got a brilliant book out. It's also a playwright and a multi-winner of slams, so very much a performer as well as a page poet. Please welcome the fantastic David Viney. Hiya, Dave. How are you doing?
Yeah.
Hi, good. Thanks for joining us. I'm loving your book, In Orbit Back Soon.
Yeah, with a picture on the front that we were really lucky to get, that everyone thinks is me, which isn't.
Who is it?
Basically, we gave the guy, we got it for free from a guy who'd done it, a young photographer who basically had done it but didn't want any money for it at all. So we basically just gave him a credit in the book. It's Sajjad Ahmadi, and basically he was just really cool about it. We needed the picture, we offered to give money for it and stuff, and he refused. So
it's a great picture. I'll just hold it up there for everybody to see. And what's that in the background?
That's just basically over the city where he was living at the time. I think it's in Libya. I think I'd have to double check that, to be honest with you, because he didn't tell me.
It's definitely not Fairlight, I can tell you that.
No, well, it's not Manchester, you know. And we tried to do a few shots of Manchester in the same kind of vibe as that, but nothing looked anywhere near as good as that. So there was just
it's difficult to get up high in Manchester. The Co-op building used to be the highest one when I lived there.
Yeah, well, now we've got the Hilton and the rest of it. There's no way they're going to let someone like me in there. I don't think, to take any shots.
You're based in Manchester and grew up in Manchester. Am I right in thinking you're very proud of your Manchester roots?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I've always said I was a fiercely proud monk. I think I'm like everyone in their city. I probably romanticize it a bit, like most people. But I think in general, things like the response to the arena bombing and things like that. I think in general, you see the best of people in those moments. Like every city, there's good and bad. And I think in general, I have got rose-tinted spectacles, obviously, but I do think that when we had the arena bombing and stuff like that, the best of people came out of it, and you could kind of see the reaction. And I was pretty proud of that. I think a lot of people came together in a difficult time, and the feeling that people can be, as we would call it, sound, I suppose, yes, is something that I kind of nurture and kind of, But yeah, like I say, I mean, I bet people in London would watch this and be like, "Yeah, shut up, Viney." But I think it is.
You don't have to. You can be proud of Manchester, and other people can be proud of other places. They're not mutually exclusive. It's just that's the experience, Well, when I went to Manchester in the 80s and spent 15 years there, and I loved it. I love the energy of it. I love the mix of people. You've got a big working class community. You've got a gay community. You've got a student community. You've got lots of different creative people. And they're all banging together and rubbing shoulders. And the energy was fantastic. I loved it. For somewhere for me to spend my 20s and early 30s, it was perfect, I thought.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah. It's a cool place. I think it's still got that going for it. Do you know what I mean? It's a lot of multicultural areas and everything kind of working together.
Now, I'm very keen that we get some of your poetry in. So could you start us off with a poem?
Yeah, I'm gonna read one actually from the first book, because I read the first book again the other day, and I realised I was a lot sweeter.
So tell me about the first book.
A poet called Dave. The first book was like, it's probably like years and years and years of work, because you don't you just have a backlog, don't you, when you start, and then it just, there's a lot of years of different ages of writing and the rest of it. And as I read through it, I realized that I was definitely less cynical than I am now. But I think that's the world we're in. I think it does that to you. I think me and Paul Needs, the Flapjack Press, is my editor. We're talking about this earlier, and I think most people, if you looked at their work, would probably say you did have a bit of cynicism creep in, and a bit of, fighting back against the world, I suppose. So my earlier stuff was probably quite light, essentially, compared to that. I'm going to read one from the book called Nothing About Today As Being Poetic. I'll do that now. This morning, breakfast was just breakfast. The toast wasn't burnt like the oily black of a desert night. It wasn't undercooked like a metaphor for my half-baked ideas. It didn't display a likeness to Jesus, like some deity-infused wholemeal imitation of the Turin shroud. It was just toast. The eggs, usually a source of multiple poetic possibilities, must have been egg-napped and replaced with one-dimensional eggs laid by a hen with no imagination. They just sat there, like eggs. Nothing about today has been poetic. The bus ride to work was equally bad, tainted by generic tight-lipped pensioners and peripheral but nondescript school children. Even the driver was standard fare. Work teetered on terrible, leaned towards lethargic, then settled on samey. There was a moment when Mike opened his lunchbox, and the way he'd arranged his apple, chocolate bar and sandwich made me think of an apple, a chocolate bar and a sandwich. Nothing about today has been poetic. When I arrived home, the cat, in an act of pure selfishness, steered well clear of the mat, preferring instead to prey on my weakness for furry beggars. Nothing about cat food is poetic. The television schedule promised thought-provoking drama, but the only thought it provoked was, I wonder when this thought will happen. Nothing about today has been poetic. Bedtime arrived like bedtime. My bed, once a coliseum of the cognitive, staging battles of the bulb, fights to the death between ideas and eye bags, was just a box-sprung mattress in an iron frame. I climbed into bed like someone climbing into bed, and my head hit the pillow like... Cheers.
Oh, that is great. I love that. That is brilliant. And I know that feeling when you feel nothing's poetic, but beautifully and poetically laid down. I've got to say, the words around the descriptions around it, are very well judged, because there is a thing in there, it can be too poetic.
Yeah. I think, excuse me. I think in terms of accessibility, I've been really lucky. I came up on poets like yourself and Lem and Dominic Berry and Jerry Potter and loads of poets from, from back in the day. And it was always good but accessible. Never felt like anyone was trying to be massively clever about it and make it impossible for anyone to get.
I think the problem sometimes. I was writing a poem to my dad earlier, because I was thinking this business about vigil. And I went and laid next to my dad when he was dying for days on end, and I put a line in about the dawn coming up, and I thought, and I'm trying to make it too pretty. It weren't pretty, The dawn came up, but it didn't creep through curtains or peep through curtains. It just fucking came up. Do you know what I mean? That one, the thing that was in the agenda. And I think the authenticity is the key. And I've got to say, I love your book, In All Be Back Soon, because it's inventive, but it's got that authenticity.
Yeah, well, I tried to. Like I said, I think I could easily fill it with metaphor and make it a bit, aim for that. But I don't see the point. There's no point. If the poetics are clever enough to make someone think and to not telegraph it before they read it, then that's enough. Do you know what I mean? I think that's fine. And especially when you're a performance poet, well, I think more than anyone, the knowing that you can make them still wonder what you're going to say next is the whole job, isn't it? That's a big part of what we do.
Well, you mentioned Lem there. Very often with Lem, I think Lem wonders what he's going to say next.
Yeah.
I was on with him up in Morecambe a couple of days ago, and it was lovely performing with him after so many years. We did try to get Johnny Dangerously to perform with us. And because I know you mentioned that you saw Lem, Johnny Dangerously, and myself back when you were a lot younger.
Yeah, it was the Royal Exchange Theatre. I've still got, if you can see it, I've printed the poster off. There you go.
That's a great.
You can see a younger version of yourself there.
You know, Lem and Johnny look very cool, and I look like I'm just about holding my own.
Well, it was a present from someone, and literally just I'd never been to a live poetry gig before. I didn't know that was a thing, and it was the Royal Exchange Theatre, so I was pretty lucky, really. But most people's is in the back of a pub, in it, so I got really fortunate that the venue was so amazing. And it was just like a 2-hour show of you guys doing like a mix of I think you were all coming. I don't think you did like a big set each. If I can remember, I think you did a bit and then came back and did different bits.
I think we did about half an hour each in the first half, and then half an hour each in the second half. So it was like a 3-hour show.
Yeah.
But when we all did half an hour, maybe 25 minutes, something like that. And I remember Johnny finished with "Bring Me Sunshine."
Yeah, he did. Yeah, and every song he did, he said, "This is a new one." And he literally, because obviously he didn't have Iron Clute then, but he literally blew my head off. I was absolutely astonished, because you're all really different as well.
We are, but do you know what? I did about 30 gigs with the two of them, and I used to drive and organise it, and we used to have such fun in the car, and it really cemented the whole idea of being a poet for me, because we get in the car, we go up to Aberdeen, and we'd have a bit of a laugh in the car. We do the gig, nothing to do for a few hours, so we go and play crazy golf or pitch and putter, go on the go-karts or something, and then we go to the next gig, and we'd find a little bit of something to do, and it was basically hanging out with your mates, and then doing your poetry, and yes, and it was lovely up in Morecambe, because it was exactly the same. We were just having a laugh. So had you done any poetry before that?
Not at all, no. It was real. I got into. I'd written poetry for years, but just as in secret, like a lot of lads where I came from. I got into it by absolute fluke. Well, the reason I got into it was like a really. I still don't know where it came from. There was a book in our house. It just turned up. Like one day it was there, and it was in a bookshelf in our front room.
And what was the book?
The book was The Mersey Sound by Brian Patton, Roger
McGough and Adrian Henry. A historic book, and I've got to say, one of the books that made me feel that I could, that I'd got the possibility of becoming a poet. And I was very lucky in that I've met all three, and obviously Adrian Henry died a while ago, but I did a gig at the Everyman in Liverpool, and he came up to me and didn't say much. He just said, "I like your images." But that was all. That's like God saying, "I like your images." It was enough.
I would take that. I think at the time I was so astonished that it was in our house, and no one would admit to it being there. I still don't know where it came from. Because no one read poetry in my house, and then I just kind of opened it like I was diffusing a bomb, because I was so I didn't really understand books that much at the time, and then just kind of went through it and had a look. And Roger McGough especially just really sort of jumped out.
Roger McGough was the first person I saw. So I was 20 years old, and he was at the Playhouse in Nottingham, and he was doing Summer with Monica. Which is a very early work of his, and it's basically about a relationship with a woman. And of course, I was 20, hoping for a relationship with a woman. I thought, spot on this. So I was well chuffed. So I'm conscious of the time. So you do a range of stuff. I've got to say that the book has got all manner of different forms, and one of the other things I love about it is you've got some sort of pictures and illustrations and little jokes that you've put in here, and it did remind me a little bit of Spike Milligan.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I am a fan of Spike and Milligan. I mean, to be honest with you as well, though, when I sort of came up, I think poetry books, that John Hegley, and the drawing thing and the image thing was in there as well. And I kind of wanted to do that a little bit. I never thought I'd be as good as them, but I think you can get your own kind of sarcasm.
Oh, you've got your own style here, and the illustrations have got their own style. Because I mean, Egley's are all line drawings, aren't they?
Yeah. It's all very, very glasses based, isn't it?
Yeah.
But
these are sort of montage, aren't they?
Yeah, a lot of it's kind of like doctored photographs and messing around, because there's a few things in the book about, especially about emoji masks, for people's expressions and stuff. But it's essentially, it was just kind of, I thought it'd be nice to have that with it. Because I know you don't necessarily need it, but it's it's a different thing, isn't it? It's nice to have.
Well, no, it splits it up, because I find if you just add serious poetry, it's like when you perform again and again and again and again, it sort of loses an impact. But if you have poems of all different shapes and sizes, and you have a little bit of distraction, whether it be music or whether it be talk or whether it be a picture, it sort of, I find it helps. So that you're refreshed when you get back to the next serious poem.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I've always thought that. When I sort of, now I'm in the position to kind of do workshops and work with younger poets and stuff. I always say to them, it's a bit like a song in a way, because you can't imagine a song without a chorus or without a bridge or
middle-aged.
Yeah. So why would you have a poem that is just a flat kind of, just goes in one direction and never changes or does anything? I think people's ears still want to hear something lively and happening and moving about. So I think in general, I know I do. And yes, you can only, I suppose, you write to your personal preference, don't you, to a degree. And I think I do that. I think I want it to be different so I don't get bored. Yeah,
I'm the same. And if I get to the end of the page, it's got to be a good one that makes me keep writing. I've got a little bit of ADHD, I think. So, will you do us another poem?
Yeah, all right. I will do another one from the first book. Hang on a sec. Yeah, this is called My Mind is Spider-Man. And it's basically, everyone thought it was me just saying that my mind was great, but it's not. It's basically about the potential of the imagination, really. I think I wrote it for kids at the time. My mind is Spider-Man. Could climb skyscrapers, but takes the less glamorous approach. Insists the ghost rooms of our boarded up bingo hall are crying out to be imagined. Says clarity begins at home. My mind is sneak peeker, thrill seeker extraordinaire, but knows an uncharted supermarket when it sees one. Perches patiently on top of the staff room vending machine, unseen and unheard, laps up every word of an imaginary conversation between a woman in her 40s called Sandra and an insecure security guard, Tony, who refuses to guarantee anyone's safety. My mind is a dysfunctional Spider-Man. Knows the day's past saving, but saves images from motorways and replays them in pointless dreams that no dream book explains. Blurred trees, hay bales in bin bags, will not spell out my issues in road cones. Says I'm sorry, but the best I can do is an emergency telephone and a cloud shaped like a farmland animal. My mind's an all-action distraction. Bus serves the number 15 while seated below. A more reserved me keeps earphones in tight, volume up, tries to tune out his shouts of, "Oi, boring." Get a motorist's attention, then lick the window. Get a motorist's attention, then lick the window. I don't, but I want to. I don't because a grown man sees bacteria where a boy sees fun. I don't because a grown man sees consequence where a boy sees none. I don't because my mind is Spider-Man. And despite what he thinks up there, Spider-Man does not lick windows. Cheers.
That is great. That is great. I love the line, clarity begins at home.
Yeah, it's one of those. I think you do puns are hard, aren't they? Because getting a pun
Well,
right.
you know, there are to make work and fit in rather than stick out like a sore thumb.
Yeah,
I think that one fits in, which is why I like it.
yeah, definitely. I think it's, if you get it right in your head, you're kind of like, got you. I like that, and you want to get it before anyone else says it because you know it's going to happen.
Now, yeah, you mentioned that you do workshops. Tell me a bit about those.
It was a thing. You know, I don't know what you were like when you started, but when I started, I did what a lot of poets do, I think, and I didn't know much about poetry. I just thought, if I know too much, I won't be able to do it right. I didn't learn much about it, and I did a lot by fluke. I think me and Thick Richard have spoken about this before, and both of us just got lucky in that we heard what we liked, we sounded, and we did it, and we didn't know about alliteration or assonance or any of the things that help. And then I got a few workshops through friends who took a bit of a risk on me, with kids and with mental health charities and all kinds of stuff. And it just kind of took off from there. I think I've learned a lot on the fly just by having to know.
Yes.
And now I know loads because it just I've got no choice. But yeah, working with a lot of kind of schools and mental health charities, working with Headspace a lot. I've worked with MenCap and youth offenders and quite a lot of places now. And it's really good. They're all different. So, and I try and do it not, I try not to phone it in. I think I'm not gonna name names, but I know that there are people who kind of walk into a workshop and go, right, let's talk about spring. You've got 2 hours, off you go.
Yeah,
it's like I couldn't do that. I need to do it so they get something out of it.
I've got to say, I found I did some workshops with schools in the early days, and I found it the hardest thing in the world to do. I'd much rather be in front of 5,000 people or 5 people in an audience, whichever, than actually be at school. I had to go and have a lie down after doing about half an hour.
Yeah, it gives you the sweat. It's hard work. It really is. Because they're a tough crowd. You know what I mean? A school does not mess about, I've noticed. So yeah, you're right. I'm the same, to be honest. I think I would literally rather walk into a big room or a crowd and just kind of do the thing. I tell you
what partly it is. It is when you know an audience, you know your terms of reference. When you're young, you have a certain terms of reference, and within your peer group, if you mention something, the connotations of it. You know that Lidl is not as high up as Waitrose. You know the subtlety of these things, and you know them. With a lot of things, with bands, music, music, fashion, and all those sort of things. And as you get older, you learn. You have a lexicon of things that again from your sort of peer group, and I find the idea with kids is they've got to. I'm not sure I've got their their terms of reference and my terms of reference meet up. Do you ever have any problem with that, or is it?
I'm not too bad. I've noticed. To be honest with you, I've noticed this even with younger audiences. Though it's the terms of reference thing is a really slippery slope, and if you're not careful, you've already dropped out of a generation of like a term or whatever, and all of a sudden they're like looking at you like, "What you're about? That's not a thing." For instance, I noticed the other day that I used to do a game called Blagging It. Which I used to. It's basically all the game is. You give them a minute. I give them something like little post-its with things they have to be an expert on for a minute. And we used to use it for young poets to. So let's say the mic doesn't work, and you have to stand there talking crap for like a minute or whatever. That your improvisation skills are a bit better. So we give them a minute. You give them something like Chief Crisp Taster for Walker's Crisps, and they get time for a minute, and they have to try and talk on it to the whole class or to the opposite partner. And as soon as I said the word blagging it, they were like, "What are you talking about?" I was like, "You don't know what blagging it is?" And they were like, "Nope." And I was like, "Right, got to change the name." It's called The Expert now. I was like, as soon as I said it, I was like, there's going to be quite a lot of things I say that they don't get. So I'm going to have to just.
Well, I always remember my dad trying to keep up with us. He used to say, "You're still listening to that Fred Zeppelin."
It's such. Yeah, well, I mean, to be honest, it's just so easy. Everything changes so fast. I mean, it's like me saying that something's sick to kids now, and they'd be like, "Whatever, mate. Of course it is." Yeah, you know, it changes so fast.
Oh, yeah, the hip terms, as we used to say back in when I was about 14. You know, are no longer hip. They've gone through, you know, 20 different variations. Now, I'm going to give notice, because we're coming up to halfway, to anybody out there who's got a question for David. If you put it into the chat, and I'm sure, Dave, you'll answer as truthfully as you're able.
Give my best shot.
Good. And yeah, it's tough. Now you've got some gigs. I know you're not doing a lot of gigs. I don't think many people do over the summer. You're not doing a lot of gigs, but you've got a couple coming up. Can you mention them to me?
Yeah. I've been busy over summer, but at the festivals. But to be honest with you, now workshops and just slowing down a bit. I've got like a million chores to do. I'm not gonna lie. I'm just gonna check my wall chart in a minute.
Yeah, go for it.
I've got, I think the next gig is in Glossop on the 21st, and I've completely forgotten the name of the night now, but I will post about it on all the socials. So if anyone follows me on the socials, they'll know about it.
Glossop on the 21st.
21st of this month. And then at 53-2, the theatre in Manchester, there is an Amnesty International gig that I'm doing on November the 18th, which is like advanced tickets, and if anyone wants to get that, it's going to be poets and musicians and a DJ and an after party. Very cute dog wandering around the place.
Good.
So yeah, I think, and to be fair, you know, if there's any other gigs, I will. In my head, I'm saying I won't take them, but I will. So if they turn up, I'll take them and put them on.
Is Amnesty International, is that a particular favourite of yours?
I've done a few for that. It's like Acoustic Amnesty, so it's a branch of it by a guy called Stephen Lindsay, and basically he just gets loads of us to do it. I mean, none of us are getting paid, but it's for a good cause. And there's quite a bit like that, and they always tend to be nice gigs with a mix of musicians and poets, and it's a change in it. It's something nice.
You know, I like doing those because it can be a lonely business just doing your own show. So it's nice to meet other artists and give a little bit back. So they're great. Now, do you do social media? Don't you?
Yeah, I do. I Twitter reluctantly because it drives me mad, and I do Instagram and Facebook and the rest of it, you know.
Yeah. I find with Facebook you can put the longer poems in place, whereas obviously with Twitter you have to photograph them or something.
I mean, it's just the problem with Twitter is it feels like it demands your attention a lot to keep it going. And I feel like I'm so busy that I'm saying stuff just to say stuff. So it's good for promoting gigs and the rest of it. I think Instagram's quite good in terms of that as well. But Facebook's a bit of an echo chamber, in it. That's the only thing. It's all the people.
I'm always a bit reluctant, but occasionally I get motivated. Like I put up a little poem about the fact that there was no black faces at the funeral, the Queen's funeral the other day, because I thought somebody ought to say. And I thought I'm going to get an onslaught now of abuse. But it's been quite positive, actually. So
I've got to be honest, I didn't watch it, but no. I can imagine in a way. I mean, it's one of those things, and it's. I think every artist I know has tread really carefully over the past few days.
I don't want to, I don't want to insult anybody. You don't make a fuss at somebody else's funeral, but 4,000 troops, 7% of the troops in this country are black. That's 280 troops. There were three.
Yeah, it's pretty bad, isn't it? gives its own message, I suppose, in a way. I mean, like I say, I mean, to be honest, and I think the only person I've seen even attempt it, apart from yourself doing that, was Kate. Kate Fox was. I did more on the Sunday,
Yeah.
and me and Kate were on the same stage, and I love Kate, and she was. She tackled it in a pretty good way of kind of doing both sides of it, and
Yeah. I'll tell you what it was. I met Adrian Mitchell once. I don't know whether you've read any Adrian Mitchell.
Yeah,
I loved Adrian. So he was. I always think of him as the fourth one of the Liverpool poets. He didn't come from Liverpool, but he had a similar sensibility. And when I met him, he said, always do the thing that's not expected. And I sort of think that there is a duty of poets not to just go with the herd, to say the thing that's not being said, and I think in your work you're quite spiky at times. You're quite strident. So you've obviously got something in you that wants. I think that you've got that thing that I would say is you want to tell the emperor he's got no clothes on.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, it's just, I think working in communities does that. I think in general, it's very hard to be apathetic if you see people struggling, and I think after that, what happens is you do think to yourself, it's ridiculous. You just do. I think most people would, and I think in your head you feel like you might have a platform, so you're bound to say something. You how can you not? Do you know what I mean?
Well, I think it's certainly one of the things that motivates me. Now, we've got a question here for you. Do you find children of certain ages, children easier to workshop with? I found 3 to 6 year olds looked at you like you knew everything, which I found intimidating. I imagine each age group has different challenges. Do you work with all the age groups? Or mainly high school? So that's a question from Dave. Thanks. A question for Dave. Yeah, there you go. That's from Sarah Dixon.
Hi Sarah. Yeah, I think I've only done a little bit of work with kids that really low age range. I know like Dominic Berry does loads of work with that age range. I think you've got to be a certain level of energy that I think I've probably has passed me now. I'm probably past it. But to be fair, I think my lot tends to be about between 9 and 11 school kids, I think. And I do some like secondary school stuff. There's the way, what I'd say is it's the same challenges I imagine, because I've not got kids, but I've got godkids and the rest that a parent would have when their kids turn a certain age. You're going to have the same things where they're going through changes of their own. Their attention span is not that great at certain ages, and they just want you to prove yourself, which I think is fair. If you're demanding their attention for however long you're there for, you should be able to hold it well. But it's on you, isn't it? You're being paid to be there most of the time. So I kind of agree with the kids. I think if some stranger turns up and says, I'm doing this, then they've got to be good. That's it. You've got to be good at it. So you take it in your own hands. But they can. I've found them to be pretty cool, I've got to say. I'm really inventive.
Great.
Really, really inventive.
Well, you're definitely inventive in the books. I'm sure you're going to be inventive in a performance space and with kids. So book early, as they say. I was reading did you watch any of this stuff on channel? So on BBC4 recently, where they had some programs about poetry. They had a season of them. Did you see any of those at all?
I haven't yet, to be honest with you. I've not seen much. I feel like I'm still playing catch up, but I'll have a look. What was it called?
There was a comment made on one of them. W.H. Auden was saying, so he wrote just before the First World War, and then he said afterwards on Parkinson, he was on Parkinson, he was saying that poetry doesn't make things happen. So this is a famous quote of his: poetry doesn't make things happen. And he said nothing that he wrote stopped one person being killed in the Second World War or delayed anything at any point in time, which is, it's an understandable thought process. But what do you think of the overall premise that poetry doesn't make anything happen?
I think he was talking about a pretty specific thing. I mean, to be fair, he's got like he's talking about such a bad thing where so many people died, and obviously he couldn't touch it, and no poem kind of comes close, I'm guessing. And we've all read the war poems, and you know, it's not going to be even close to being in a trench, I'm guessing. But I think it depends on the definition. I think the definition of changing things, if I'm changing the viewpoint of a 9-year-old and he ends up being a poet like me and you, then I think that's changed something. And you know, I'm not going to say that it saves lives, but who knows? You know, I think my life would have been markedly different. I know that. I think the way I was going, I probably would have been a terrible criminal, or I just would have been, you know, just like on a track in a terrible job I couldn't stand, and really, really, really depressed. So
I don't think I'd have been a terrible criminal. I think I'd have been a greengrocer. I don't know whether that's a good or a bad thing.
I don't know. That's kind of middleish, isn't it? Greengrocer, but you know, you could be the best greengrocer ever, though. To be fair,
I like that answer, David. I think that's you can draw from your own experience, and I think poems have changed me, and they've changed people around me that have talked to me about it. So I think he was probably expecting too much. I don't think they can change individuals, and individuals make things happen. That would be my take on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, didn't John Cooper Clarke say something like there's no place for politics in poetry, or something like that?
All right.
I'm sure John said that. I mean, the thing is, it's changed so much now. It's so focused on that in a lot of the newer poetry nights and the rest of it.
Isn't it funny though? Because Beasley Street is probably one of the most political poems of the last 50 years.
Yeah, really. Yeah.
Keith Joseph smiles and a baby dies in a box on Beasley Street. I mean, that's one of the most politically charged lines. Yeah, it's funny to. I mean, most of his stuff isn't political, but that one is, I think. There's somebody who's written here. Let's have a little look. Carolyn Garland. I believe that the world of exploration through words has a powerful impact, but not always in the direct way. Probable it happens more subliminally. Yeah, no, I agree with that. I don't think you can force something to happen. I think you put it out there, don't you? Your poem, and people make of it what they will. I wrote a poem about a girl leaving me when I was up in Manchester, and people read it at funerals.
Okay.
It's about loss. It's about loss, but my loss was a particular girl leaving me, but for other people it's, you know, it's about death.
It's got that connection. Yeah, I mean, I like that though. I think it's really nice that it's got double meanings. I think exactly what you said. I think once I've written it, it's out of my hands. It's you know, I can get a room with it, but then it doesn't mean that they're getting it in the same way I wrote it. I suppose they're just getting it.
Now, see if we can get another poem in. What else have you got for us?
Okay, I'll do something out of the new book. I will do one that I've started doing at gigs recently, which is called, if I can find it, The Walk of Acclaim. The reason this is in there is I really hate the term the Walk of Shame.
Yes.
That when people come home after they've been out all night and they, you know, they're wearing the same clothes. I think, as I say in the gigs, I think considering we're in a world where it's more and more difficult to be social, and, you know, for pandemics and financial reasons and, you know, just anxiety and God knows what else, we should be celebrating it. There should never be like a case of seeing someone coming out from a night out and being like, oh, how could you, you know? And I think people look great when they're walking home in their spangly dress, you know, at 3 o'clock in the morning. I think it's cool. So this is called The Walk of Acclaim. Today, heads heavy as aeroplanes. Today, belly a carousel of foreign items. Today, home, bed, sanctuary, delayed, delayed, delayed. Today, we touch down like the Beatles. Today, the walk of shame is repackaged, relabeled, re-released to critical acclaim. Today, our hangover tells us it is bigger than God, and we believe. Today, our arrival sees the crowd swell. Reporters desperate for a glimpse of regret fantasize our engine failure. Fans silently mime their screams of adulation. A sponsorship deal with aspirin is a mere formality. We are finally, unreservedly adored. It is the least we deserve. Yesterday was not a car crash. Yesterday was a test of our capabilities. Yesterday, the momentum of crash test bodies and crumpled frames. Yesterday, whiplash interactions and unpredictable impacts. Yesterday, we crashed, we burned, we sculpted ourselves from ash. Yesterday, all my troubles seemed delayed.
That's great. That's great. Well, what a lovely poem. Yeah. It's nice that you've. There's a lot of reflection in your poems, but you do soften it with humour, which is great. So sweeten the pill, as they say.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of it. I mean, I think I've had it's not an argument, but I've had this conversation with workshops before, and for me, I think you alluded to it earlier. Actually, I think it just kind of, like you say, sweetens it and maybe gives you like a bit of license to do something a bit more serious after it or
Yes.
whatever. And I think we are there to entertain. At the end of the day, that is the job.
I find as well, even in the bleakest moments, there's humour. That's been my experience of life. You know, when you're at funerals, or surrounded by a death, or like I broke my arm recently. There's still things to laugh about. So the idea that you've got to compartmentalise it seems a little bit false to me.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I think most people find dark humor and stuff. Like you say, in funerals, the wake is undoubtedly always full of jokes. It just is part of how we react to things, isn't it? Human nature. But I do think people, I mean, I've noticed in some of the poetry nights that have sprung up now, that I've been to, and there's nothing against this way of writing, but I have noticed that they do sometimes get freaked out by something that might be funny or injected into it as a music, because they think it dilutes the point.
Yeah.
And I find that like worrying, because I'm just like, dark humor should never die out. It should always be there. That's important.
I always like it at funerals when people tell nice stories about, fun, uplifting stories about people. Obviously, the Queen's funeral didn't have any of that, and in a way, again, it sort of distances you a little bit, because we want to feel that the humanity of everybody that dies. There's a little joke somebody's put here on the side. It says, nothing works well forced except rhubarb. I'll make a good title for a poem now.
It's found poem. I'll say that.
That's Carolyn Garland. Somebody, Sarah Dixon's put, once you put it out there, you can't control the reading of it. That's very true. And quite right too. It should do the trick on its own. Now you do the poetry slams. I've never actually been to a poetry slam, strangely enough. I like the idea of them, and I did put one on television when I worked in television. But give me a bit of insight here. What's the best thing and what's the worst thing about poetry slam?
Now you're asking. I haven't done one for a while. The reason for that is it can be so random. And also, there used to be an element of what I used to call applaudance. And the thing being, if you know this, if you travel alone as a poet, which I do quite a lot, and then you end up doing a slam in a city where you're not familiar, a lot of the audience reaction scores are going to come from the table of the person who lives there, who's doing their poem. So they're going to get like a huge roar of applause, and you're going to get like one guy at the back like, hey. So it is a bit random. I also think in more recent years, I know Lem hates slams. I remember seeing a thing from Lem, and quite rightly so, because it discourages people, so I can kind of get why. And basically what has happened is it became and I'm sure a lot of people will agree with this. Some people will probably try and tell me off, but it is what it is. A bit of a top trumps of trauma. So what happened is people realized that you would be very hard pushed to not go mad or appreciative for a certain type of poem, which is telling someone's, all giving their insides out, and you just kind of would. But that
laying the pain on the table.
Yeah. And then what happens is it just means that people react in slam. So then everyone else goes, oh my God, what have I got that matches that level of like terror and bad things happening? And everyone just does it that way. Humor will sometimes get past that, but then it seems a bit trite compared to what someone's just said. So I think there's bits I like and there's bits I don't. It can get you work. What Lem said, which I totally agree with, is if you're not careful, you could discourage the next future poet who's an amazing poet, because they do that.
So I worked in television for 30 years, and I got to see lots of great programs, things like Gavin and Stacey and Philomena, and brilliant things. But also I got to see hundreds of scripts that were brilliant but never got made. So I did worry about that. And some of these scripts were so good, you'd expect them to be made, but they weren't. So I've written a little poem called Prayer for the Rejected. So this is to any poet out there who's done something brilliant, but has not been recognised. A prayer for the rejected. We start from nothing and build. And you may judge down from perfection, catalogue all that we are not, measure against legends and eons, ignore mitigation, dismiss originality as untested, discard uncrafted as unprofessional, destroy with a whim, discount our unborn, belittle our dreams, and despite all this, again, we start from nothing and build. So I'm hoping we'll get David back. His book is it's a very thick, chunky book from Flapjack. I didn't know about the earlier one, but as I say, it's got lots of illustrations in it, and the poems. I mean, in the back there's some which I was going to ask David about. There's some like little playlets, but the poems of all different shapes and sizes. And a vast array of material. So hopefully we'll get him back. Have you got any questions for me? Oh, thank you. Somebody said they like that poem. That's good. If you've got any questions for me whilst we're filling in, I'm happy to answer them. If not, I'll read you another poem whilst we're waiting. Let's have a little look. Oh. I've got to turn these with my broken arm, so I'm suffering for my art at the moment. So I was looking at the politicians on the telly earlier on, and I thought I'd read you this poem, which sprung to mind. It's called I'd Like You to Know. When you feel you've handled the situation, when you've used the jargon, applied the textbook, when you've selected only the supporting facts, edited memory and redrawn history, when you've ignored the question and deftly changed the subject, when you've gone on the attack to avoid the obvious and leave no space for reply, when you think you've got away with it, when you're patting yourself on the back for being so clever, I'd like you to know I can see your lies. I don't know if you've been watching the news today. It's quite nice to have a bit of news one way or another, and hopefully we'll get back to some semblance of tackling the big issues of people being able to live a good life, which I would imagine the vast majority of us in this country and this world want to do. How are we doing? We've got another 7 minutes. What's that? Thanks for this evening. So somebody, I don't know if they're going out the door. Thanks. Loved hearing both your chat, do your poems develop much through performance, or are they finished before you take them out? That's a good question. I write a range of poems like David, and some I write for myself. I mentioned earlier that I'd written a poem for my dad. I was thinking about the word vigil. I've not got the poem, unfortunately, to read you, but I was thinking about the word vigil, and I was thinking, what does the word vigil mean to me? So I visited my dad and laid with him for days before he died, and we didn't speak much because he really wasn't of a mind for speaking, and I didn't sleep much, to be honest with you. So it was quite a big thing, and I've not. That was about 6 years ago. I've not written about it until the word vigil came into the fray, and so I have now. So that was one that needed a bit of maturation through my system to come out. You're back, David.
I am. I'm so sorry. My phone did an involuntary update. I was like, oh. It just took me completely out of the conversation. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no. You know, technologies can do that. I was in a car with another poet, Pete Ramskill, and we were trying to get through a major city, and his phone did an update whilst his phone was leading the sat nav.
Nice.
So we were going blind for a good 5 minutes before we were able to know which way to turn. Yeah, a nuisance. Thanks for coming back and getting that sorted. That's brilliant. So we've had a good session. We've got 5 minutes. Let's have a look. Yeah, there's just a few. So I read a couple of my own poems whilst you're away, David, just to fill in the time.
Sorry, I missed it.
That's all right. No. But I think we've kept most people anyway. So I've got to say that you're doing a lot of stuff, and you've done a lot of stuff. What gives you the most pleasure?
I think, do you know what? I still think performing. I think I had quite a quiet childhood. My mum and dad divorced when I was about 7, but I think it was quite quiet anyway. I didn't connect very well, and I think when I was older, I used to say to the younger poets that there's a moment where you realise you can be really anxious and walk into a room full of people, and at a gig. And then you can get on stage and do 20 minutes and you've broken every barrier that you were worried about in the first place, because you kind of told them loads about you inadvertently and everything you've said. And then they'll come up to you and they'll chat to you, and all the stuff you were worried about is kind of gone. So I think for me, the connection bit is just huge. I think that's the bit that I really relish. I think that's the bit I want. So yeah, I really like that. I just think it's an amazing thing to resonate with a load of people, especially at the moment where everyone's at each other's throats, and you know, people argued about anything now, won't they? So it feels like a room full of people all connecting is huge.
That's a lovely answer. Now I love that. And I think the great thing about poetry is as well that it opens the conversation up, because you're giving your perception of the world and you've thought it through. It opens it up to more than just idle chatter. You talk more about issues and feelings and you know, things that matter and things that stay with you because of poetry. So as you say, when you do 20 minutes, you've done 20 minutes, but it's actually a very concentrated, rich. It's a Christmas pudding's worth of 20 minutes.
Yeah, 100%.
As opposed to a Victoria sponge.
Yeah, stuff you wouldn't, like you say, stuff you probably wouldn't get out in a conversation is just there. And also because I suppose that's the craft, and we're editors if for nothing else, is that we kind of put it in this perfectly sized, edible version that you can just have within 3 minutes, maybe, you know. And I think if you think about it, that's we're kind of one of the only crafts that can do it. it's like sort of 3 minutes. There you go. You get a full story in that.
Yeah, and I love the fact that it's very pure as well. It's not been pulled this way or that way. I know Paul does a little bit of editing, but you have to agree to it.
Yeah, he's a great editor.
Yeah, and you know, there's something great about that. You were talking about, before we got cut off, you were talking about Lem and his idea of poetry slams. I've always had this thing where I can't see how poets and poems are in competition. I don't think any two poets or any two poems are in. I think they're complementary to each other. So I'd find that I've never entered a poetry competition, and I've never judged a poetry competition, and I never would. I just think they're. It's like judging your kids. Do you know what I mean? What's the best kid?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's
easy for me. I've only got one, so I'd you know,
I think it's
choice.
Yeah, I mean, I've got 2 cats, and I'm not allowed to judge between those 2. But I think in general, I mean, Lem's right. It's fraught with danger, because why squash someone's potential, which is kind of what it could do. I mean, the purists will say about slams that they say, well, we've given them a platform and they won, and now they've gone off and they're doing gigs in Europe and they're doing, you know. But I think there's a real a skill to a 20-minute set that a slam doesn't cover. I think you've got to be able to hold a room for 20 minutes. A slam doesn't really tell you that. It's like you've 3 poems, you're just whacking them out. Because there's less sets about now as well, really. You know, in the new local scene, there's less feature sets. There's a lot of open mic nights and a lot less feature sets.
Now, when I was in Manchester, we'd get up, Lem and I, and DK and Sue Andy and a lot of the other people that were there, Kev Fegan at the time. You'd get up anywhere. You get up at a folk club, you get up at jazz club. At Stockport Town Hall, I was on after can-can dancers.
Nice. Yeah, so, I like that. It's great.
Yeah. So you know, there was sort of you didn't have a set amount. You just, you know, you were thrown into the situation, and you did what you could, really. So it sort of made you have things of different lengths with different audiences.
Yeah, but I mean, my favourite gig is Shangri-La in Prestwich. It's just always a good gig. It's a cabaret night. So it's you're on with, you know, a belly dancer and a band and, you know, a comedian, and the audience doesn't belong to you, so you've got to win them, and that's it.
That's lovely. And I mean, the gig you came to with John, that came from, we used to do gigs a lot with musicians, and I toured with Pulp at one stage, and as you say, it's not your audience. You've got to win them round. They've not come to see me; they've come to see Pulp. So you've got to be on the front foot. Now, I've got a couple of things there. Is that how you broke your arm, Henry? Can-can dancing, somebody's called. That's very funny. No, I was up a pergola, which is not very sexy, to be honest with you. Connections is why we're all here, says Jane. Hope you noticed the irony of your love of poetry being its way for you to connect, and the disconnection of your phone. Oh yeah, very good.
Oh, okay. There we go.
People versus the material, which is real. Yeah, that's very true. Now, so we've come to the end of the hour. Would you finish us off with a poem, David? And thanks ever so much for talking to us today and reading us some of your poetry. It's been brilliant.
No, I've really enjoyed it. It's been great. You've been like, I've been doing this for like quite a long time now, and obviously because you were the first gig I ever saw, it's the first time I've ever spoken to you, so I was kind of like, oh no way, Henry, no. You look at it and fanboy you the entire time, to be honest. Right, I'll do this one. This is one I do in the set at the moment. I'm going to read it because I don't get to read it very often. Okay. It's called I Want to Be Your Stuntman. I want to be your stuntman. As dawn peeps over the curtains, laughing maniacally into our mole-eyed, box-set, binging faces, I want to forward roll out of bed, sprint across the landing and throw myself down the stairs before smothering the post like a hand grenade. Then, after a moment of medical self-assessment, I want to tear open the envelope marked urgent and joyfully proclaim, "It's okay, it's just a final warning," which, stepping out of the poem for a second, was a lot funnier before it costs less money to fly somewhere warm than it did to heat your house.
Yeah.
I want to be your stuntman. When you're sneaking into work late, worry tugging at your features like an anxious child on a coat sleeve, an unidentified skiving object on your boss's rebellion radar. I want to smash through your office foyer window engulfed in flames, a human illumination, a dazzling distraction as you slip by unnoticed in the powder dust smog of several fire extinguishers to start your workday 30 minutes before you arrive. I want to be your stuntman. When the Sunday supermarket hordes pay no mind to your drum solo hangover, I want to co-opt the security guard, throw the first air punch, and invoke the spirit of a Hollywood Western as a blurred tangle of sham angry customers play fight by the self-service tills. Fake sugar glass condiment bottles smashing over heads, kicks that don't connect, fists that don't land, assaulting only the cool conditioned air around them, while across the store you hazily contemplate comfort food in the comfort of your own aisle. I want to be your stuntman. When the cinematic storm mumbles its advance apology and the washing line weather report is thunder pants and ISO bras, when your Saturday night garms are in harm's way, I want to leap from a first floor window onto a pile of conveniently placed cardboard boxes, catch an angry, baffled cat thrown by an overzealous stunt coordinator, and deflect an in-flight phony fence panel before plucking those close to safety like they were toddlers in the path of a runaway bin lorry. I want to be your stuntman. I want that fall in 10 stories minimum love, that real hurricane, not a wind tunnel love, that fighting on top of express trains love, that cling to a wing of a jet plane love, that flip in a car doing 80 love, that jump from explosion to safety love, that swim through a flooded compartment love, that gunned down by Hollywood hard men love. And when I'm past all that perilous things type love, it can still be a take out the bins type love. But for now, I want to be your stuntman. There you go.
Thanks, thank you. Next week we've got Rob Stevenson, same time. Do join us then. Thanks to David and thanks to everybody for joining us. Have a good night.
Thanks, guys. Thanks very much. See you later, guys.